Good morning, everyone, assuming that you might be in a time zone similar to mine. And welcome to the session on engaging your people to accelerate technology change. My name is Chris Williams. I'm a partner at Root. I'm joined by my colleague, Jill Kapura, and together we both co-lead our technology adoption practice. So hopefully we're in the right place. Here you can see photos of us in our natural habitats. And just before a couple of you get concerned, I'm not actually throwing my daughter into a field. I do promise I'm actually catching her. I am in the process of catching her. I don't want to disturb people right
I will say she looks a little bit nervous about it, so I'm not totally confident in you.
You know, that I think you're right. I think she possibly is a little bit nervous. But anyway, let's go straight on to the agenda. So this is what we're going to explore together today. We're going to take a little bit of time just getting grounded in the realities of digital change today. Not very long, just a couple of minutes. Then we're going to explore the common people challenges that can create choke points for technology change. As part of that process, we're going to learn 4 tips that go along with those people challenges to better engage and mobilize workforces in new technology. And we're going to discover how to have tough conversations about technology change adoption with your transformation team. And my promise to you during all of this is, and hopefully you're already seeing it, hopefully you were bopping along to the music if you got here early, we promise this is going to be live, this is going to be fun, this is going to be quite fast and furious, but most of all, we want this to be interactive. So all that we're going to ask from you is try to limit your distractions, turn off your email. This is just going to be half an hour, and I promise you it's going to be worthwhile. And so with that, Jill, over to you.
All right, so I think there was already that question you see in the chat, but we want to start off with finding that chat in the lower right-hand side of the screen, make sure it says send to all participants, and let us know what technology change are you experiencing right now. And this could be a large digital transformation, or it could be a small piece of technology. We're interested in all of it. And I see a few responses already, and adopting Teams is a popular one so far.
So adopting Teams, what else do we have? PN software implementation. Yes, Lauren, I'm fairly familiar with that. Adopting Teams, Sonia, Christine, significant digital transformation. Right, it's not always just about one technology, it's about whole ecosystems. Learning platform adoptions in higher education, collaborative project management, that's our second project management. Oh, blimey, I can't even keep up now.
Epic up there as well, expanding our CRM capabilities, OneDrive, upgrading lots of legacy systems, implementing a new customer experience management platform. So there's a lot going on there, a lot of teams, definitely a big one.
POS. Oh, hi, Colette. Digital whiteboards. Good to see you here, Colette. Digital whiteboards for collaboration. Very cool. We do something similar. New knowledge base. So knowledge management, I'm assuming. Customer experience platform. Oh, would love to know which one that is, Kenneth. Updating lots of legacy systems. Yes, Tammy. I think there are many of us are doing this. So I see one major thing. A lot of people are implementing Teams, Jill. That's one thing. And then otherwise, it's kind of across the board, whether it's ERPs or electronic medical records, customer experience, point of sale. So lots of different technologies that we're all dealing with today.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that summary. And before we get into how to best engage your people in all of that technology change that you just told us about, and there's a lot going on there, I want to briefly share a little bit about Root and our guiding principles. So we've helped hundreds of global organizations, including 2/3 of the Fortune 100, drive critical change and bring their strategies to life through their people. And we do this through our creative approach to engaging the hearts and minds of employees in critical content. And I want to start with Root's approach to change more generally, because this applies directly to how we approach technology change. Our purpose at Root is to invigorate the power of human beings to make a difference. And basically, what this means to me is to help people find meaning in their work every day. And we achieve this through addressing 4 key elements needed for true engagement that you see on screen. Often we find that organizations focus primarily on intellectual engagement, and I think this is especially true with technology adoption and new technologies being introduced. And this means that intellectual engagement is ensuring people have the relevant information to understand what's changing, and it's absolutely necessary. But we know that it's equally important to focus on these other three. So the emotional engagement to ensure people connect to the compelling why, the behavioral engagement to ensure that people understand how to bring the change to life, and then finally that social engagement to sustain change through reinforcement and recognition of those changes that you want to see. Additionally, we believe that how you engage people is just as important as who you engage and when. And our methodology at Root combines visualization to create shared meaning with discovery-based learning to help people come to their own conclusions rather than being told what to do. No one really likes that. And creating interactions and dialogue to allow people to share perspectives and learn from each other. I hear you chuckling there, Chris. I know that you love when I tell you what to do and how to change.
I hate being told what to do. You're right. And by the way, I love this guy at the end here. I want to feel like that every day at work. That looks like engagement to me.
It actually brings me right back into the office. I can totally see that happening in an episode there. And so, Chris, I'm going to hand it off to you to really build how this applies to digital change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jill. And I want to start by just getting us grounded in the realities of digital change just by using 3 data points. Now, the first one probably isn't going to be a surprise to you. According to West Monroe Partners, 33% of organizations are setting up significantly new digital capabilities as a result of COVID-19. And we can see by a lot of your responses, you might be thinking, that's us. A third of organizations are having to really rethink their digital ecosystems. Now, this isn't all of you. You might not be implementing brand new digital capabilities. You may already have been on your digital transformation journey for many years. But for many of us, or maybe even most of us, we're having to accelerate that journey, that digital transformation journey. Now, whether you are looking to drive brand new digital innovation or accelerate projects, there's a couple of statistics from pre-COVID times, and my gosh, I can barely remember a pre-COVID time. It seems like so long ago, but it wasn't that long ago. There's a couple of statistics that I think are really important for us to actually chew on a little. So this first one, this is from a Forbes Insight survey that was at the turn of the year, when we still thought 2020 was going to be a great year, right? Anyway, in that survey, they discovered that 75% of executives are still waiting to reap tangible benefits from disruptive technology. Now, that's kind of crazy. You think that organizations are spending trillions of dollars at the moment to make their organizations leaner, meaner, faster, more customer-centric. And yet 3/4 of leaders say that they're not getting a return on their investment. Wow. I mean, that kind of blew me away. But here's the kicker. McKinsey did a survey in which they asked C-level leaders, what is the biggest barrier to digital effectiveness? And the number one answer was... I just stole your thunder
there, Chris. I'm sorry for that, but there you go again.
Hey, no problem. You do this to me the whole time. All right. But it's culture. Culture is the most significant barrier to digital effectiveness. So that's 1/3 of all respondents say culture is the most significant barrier to digital effectiveness. So when we boil this all down, digital transformation is as much about people and behavior as it actually is about technology. When we talk about transformation, it's just as much about behavior change as it is about technology change. It's distinctly a human endeavor. So with that in mind, that's what we're really going to focus on today. We're going to focus on the human element of technology change. So what are those human issues that can get in the way of driving technology change? What you see here is a screenshot of an interactive experience that we use with organizations to identify pain points and opportunities related to whatever technology change they're going through. Now, we normally spend about 45 minutes in a pretty rich group conversation about technology change that they might not otherwise have. So with teams working with them. And now today, of course, we don't have that sort of time. So we are going to do a highlights tour, a whistle-stop tour, if you will. Now, we are going to let you know how you might be able to access this full exercise with your own teams at the end of this webinar. So quick disclaimer, all characters depicted in the scene are fictional. Well, they're kind of based on things we've commonly witnessed when working with clients, and any similarities to you, your colleagues and bosses are purely coincidental. Jill, why don't you, actually, sorry, I need to take you through a little tour of this, help you navigate this. All right, so as you can see here, we have various platforms representing large employee groups within an organization, a part of a fictional organization. So right at the top, you can see we have our leaders, and they are making decisions on new technology, and they're signing checks. And Jill, what are they shouting out to the rest of the organization?
This system will solve all our challenges.
All right, okay. That was okay, Jill. I really need you to amp it up next time. Okay, so
all right, I'll do my best.
They then send the order off to the PMO and OCM. Probably a number of you might sit within this group, and they're thinking to themselves, Jill, what are they thinking to themselves?
We're on time and we've nailed that system architecture. Why are the users struggling?
Very good. I'm very impressed, Jill. So let's have a look at that manager platform, the yellow platform, the kind of beef patty in our burger, if you will. And you look at them, and what are they thinking about, Jill? What are they thinking?
I don't see how this will help me hit my goals this year. Why should I focus my team on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, on the green platforms, we have our employees, generally our user base. And you can see that a lot of those folks aren't necessarily in the traditional workplace anymore. Probably like you and I today, many of those are working from home. And what's that guy on the sofa saying there, Jill?
I really don't see how this makes my job easier. Do they even know what I do?
Absolutely. And then finally, there's a guy who is sweating wildly, and he's screaming out. What's he screaming, Jill?
Another new priority? I'm totally overwhelmed already. I don't have time for this.
Jill, your talent is wasted. You should have been in the theater.
I'll start my acting career tomorrow.
So you'll notice that we have a little chat icon. Whenever that comes up, we're looking for some interaction from you. And what we want to know from you is what resonates the most. When you look at this visual, what resonates with you?
My voiceover talent.
Well,
I'm going to go with that.
Resonates.
So I see the lack of middle manager engagement, then that beef part of the patty, which sounds so appetizing, Chris.
Yeah,
and then from Chris, hi Chris, the what's in it for me aspect, so it doesn't help me hit all my goals.
And Amy, just the employees overall, and Tammy, another new priority. Yep, we all feel that.
Mm-hmm. The work from home environment, that's really new for a lot of people. It's definitely a big challenge there. The employees being overwhelmed is a really big one, and that for me is one that sticks out every time, as well as the possible lack of training between thinking they nailed it and why the users are struggling. So that disconnect there, the false sense of promise, I'll solve all the challenges leads to disappointment along the way. And we'll come back to that, Carrie, for sure.
And Lauren, preach. If managers don't see it as important, then their direct reports won't either. Yes, totally agree. Amy, leaders think they found a sure fix. This is easy. Here you go. Now it's your turn to execute, right? Dan, the one that really got you is the program a month. Love it. Where something is a huge priority, then in 3 months it's completely gone. Priority on top of priority. Possible lack of training between thinking and nailed it. So why are the users struggling like that? All right, fantastic. This is great, folks. So I'm going to ask you one more question. And so, fingers at the ready. What's missing from the scene? What would you add? If you could add a quote to here, what would you add? Let's do a couple. The why, Paul, and where might you see that, Paul? Probably the employees, right, saying, why are we doing this? And Kim's pointing out that, well, the customers aren't represented on here. Is this maybe too internal? But leadership lacking empathy. Amy also said the customers need to be on here. And Christy wrote purpose. I'm going to translate that as, how does technology actually connect to purpose? Or perhaps you might mean, what's the purpose of this technology? We could go either way, but they're both important points. Customer saying, why can't you change to make my transactions easier? Love it. That's a proper reaction. Paul from the driving forces, top down or bottom up? Tad, I like what we have works just fine. And maybe someone on various platforms can be saying that. Oh, Christy, thank you. You make connection to purpose. Appreciate that. Terry acknowledging what a major change it is and more one-on-one encouragement. And Colette, will this really help me do my job? How? All right. Fantastic. Thank you, folks. We appreciate you leaning on here. Jill is a very fast typer, and she's been annotating, but there's only so much we can do. Jill, why don't we take a deep dive?
All right, sounds good, Chris. So we are going to, in the next 11 minutes or so, which is quite the challenge, we've had this high-level overview. We're going to take a tour of each of these platforms in the visual, and for each, we'll highlight a few additional key challenges and share how you can solve these challenges through several different strategies to engage your people throughout the change. So we're going to dive into this leaders platform first. So on this platform, you can see that the functional and business line leaders represented by the jigsaw puzzles that are kind of not quite fitting together. They're not well connected. They're all pointing in different directions with slightly different priorities. Now, the business case seems to be crystal clear for the leaders, and so it should be for everyone else too, right? So their checks are signed, their work is delegated, and they're off to the next thing. And while there is some concern around the organization's ability to adapt to the technology successfully, at the same time, we saw this in some of the comments, the leader with that bullhorn is focusing only on the benefits that have been promised and telling everyone that the system will solve all of our challenges. And so this is how I would summarize this scene. Leaders agree on the investment, but they lack alignment on the story behind the investment. So they're bogged down by lots of other priorities, and they often see their role in tech adoption as cheerleaders as opposed to real change agents. And here is actually what is seen, what the employees tend to see. So rather, they see the VP of Hype who bounds onto stage and confidently proclaims that your new technology will be the best thing since sliced bread, and then they disappear in a puff of smoke. They see the director of shiny new things. They see a VP of buzzwords, and we all know that person. It's the leader that uses a bunch of words no one understands, but no one really dares to raise their hand and question. They see the director of ambiguity, who outlines that digital strategy in a town hall, but when employees leave, they're kind of clueless at what they're actually supposed to do. And so it turns out that leaders are often bigger choke points to successful technology change than they would ever know. We do user interviews and focus groups in the front end of most of our engagements, and every time we've heard that employees are very aware whether or not their leaders are informed, whether they're aligned, and whether they're engaged relating to that technology. So here's the question for you. How do you leverage leaders as your first line of change agents as opposed to one of your biggest change obstacles? And here is our answer. Give your leaders a specific role of story creator. Your leaders need to build a compelling and a consistent narrative for your digital change. Whatever it is you're implementing, it's actually not the best thing since sliced bread. News alert. You need to be honest and open about that message and about open message that takes both the business and the employees' perspectives into consideration. And very specifically, the story needs to be built by your organization's leaders, not the project team, not the OCM team, not the system integrators. And it should clearly connect to the broader organizational strategy to help connect the dots between those priorities. And this enables the business line leaders to truly take ownership of the story and become the drivers of change. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like, because those are great words, but what does that actually look like? At Root, we use several tools to help build this story in an interactive way, to engage leaders in the actual build of the story. And we do this by using a series of prompting questions about the current state, the future state, and the key shifts that need to be made to get there. And then we help the team synthesize their different perspectives into one single narrative. Now, we can do this both in person and virtually, but the key is here to make a collective effort in order to build ownership rather than to spell it out in advance and hand over the story that should just be memorized or recited by leaders. And then this can become that one truth of the technology story and becomes the foundation for all the communications and user engagement going forward. So moving on this very quick tour, we're going to dive next into the PMO and OCM platforms that you see here. And so in this image, what we see is a gentleman who seems to be caught in the process whirlpool, sustainment plan that's being thrown on the floor as the team moves from project to project because there's so much going on. And while technically speaking, it looks like this group is killing it, they're actually struggling to connect with users. So to summarize this one, focusing on project metrics and process milestones doesn't take into consideration the emotional roller coaster that change often is. So here is where I'm going to get a little bit controversial. Traditional change management sucks. It has a terrible reputation, and rightly so. Let's just be honest about it. So it's often really process heavy and considers users as adversaries that need to be won over. And the very definition of change management is managing the people side of change, but somewhere along the line, it kind of forgot about the people. And while process is very important, I want to just say that process is really important, and having a set of tools is also extremely helpful. Process and tools alone won't engage people. And so the tip here is to move from technology down to a user-first approach. Don't start with the features and the benefits of the tool and try to ram those down the user's throats. Instead, start with the users, their needs, their concerns, their preferences, their drivers, and work backwards. This takes a deeper level of research than you might find in a traditional stakeholder analysis, and also requires ongoing pulse checks to get feedback throughout the process, not just at the very beginning. How we do this at Root is through an initial insights phase with a mix of interviews, focus groups, and surveys. And this can happen at the very beginning of initiatives, or it can happen, sometimes we do it after the technology has been implemented to better understand how and why people are or are not using it after implementation. And through this insights phase, we develop change principles for that specific initiative, and from there build out a change engagement roadmap for how best to bring people along throughout the journey, not just at one point in time, and increase that overall adoption. And then I do want to emphasize, as part of the roadmap, we plan for these regular pulse checks because we know that the plan will have to evolve and we'll have to adjust it as it goes. So Chris, I know we're pretty close on time here, and we have 2 more tips to get through here for you. I do want to say we will send out this recording afterwards in case anyone has to jump off.
Okay. All right, great. So let's move on to the mighty middle, your managers. Now, when we think about managers, and we saw this in the chat to begin with, this is often the most influential group when it comes to engaging employees and maximizing technology adoption. But a lot of organizations really struggle to understand how to activate this group in meaningful ways. So in this scene, the 3 folks on the left-hand side, they're getting messaging from their leadership team, but they don't necessarily understand it. And when you don't understand something very well, it becomes very hard to communicate with your teams about, right? On the right-hand side, on the top and the bottom, you can see that those managers are actually probably a little closer to the front line, and so that they're able to see problems and opportunities that perhaps their leaders can't see. And then right in the middle, you see a guy whose goals don't align with the behavior change that you need to see as part of your technology implementation. So a whole range of challenges here, and this is my quick summary of this. Managers don't have all the context they need and struggle to connect teams to new technology. Now, the problem is normally that too much is expected of your managers to really spark those interactions with around technology with their teams. And so employee engagement becomes all about the ability of your managers to proactively engage those groups. It's actually about their competency, how good a manager they are. That's why there can be so much inconsistency within an organization where adoption, honestly, is actually all about how good a manager you have as opposed to how good your change adoption plan actually is. So our tip here is that you can actually remove a lot of that inconsistency if you create tools for managers that means they don't have to sell the new technology. They don't have to be experts in the new technology. They just have to be able to facilitate a conversation. In this case, this is an example of a client who was implementing a new ERP, and we created a film around why this is important. It was about a 3-minute, really engaging animation, but we coupled it with a manager toolkit and discussion questions, which meant that the group, small group, were able to have around 20 to 30 minutes worth of conversations. So remember, your one piece of takeaway that I want you to walk away with is smart questions are always going to be more powerful than didactic answers. So make it easier for managers to facilitate those conversations. And finally, we are on to our employees, and we have 2 minutes. Let's go to that next screen, please, Jill. And there's an awful lot going on here. And I think the way that I would summarize this is that users are really stressed. They're overwhelmed. Let's go straight to the summary here, Jill, as people read this through, please. Thank you. So you can see that they're drowning under a sea of priorities. They don't feel heard or involved, and their emotion is overriding their intellectual reaction to technology change, as it so often does. So what can you actually do about it? Now, there's no magic bullet, but we want to focus on one thing that we think makes a specific difference. So your user interactions need to break through the noise. Think about your employees right now. They are more than likely, as I say, drowning under that sea of priorities. They're inundated with messages, with requests, and the same types of presentation over and over again. And quite frankly, they often check out. So in this case, this guy's watching The Mandalorian. And yes, I know that Baby Yoda is cute, but come on, Terrence, there's a time and a place. Focus on it.
Are you saying I should stop watching The Mandalorian right now, Chris? Oh.
Well, yes, when I'm speaking to you, absolutely. So Jill talked about the importance of crafting that compelling story. So how you craft the story is important, but how you deliver it is crucial. So your ultimate goal shouldn't be to relay a message. Our ultimate goal is to change the conversations that your people are having. That's when you see behavior change. I'll repeat that. If you want to see behavior change, you have to change the conversations that people are having. And that often means that you have to get quite creative. So think about the way that your users interact with things outside of work. What do? They watch films, they play games, they listen to podcasts, they're on their mobile phones. So you have to meet your users where they are. And again, really focus on that interactivity and driving self-discovery. Jill, over to you to close this out.
Yeah, so to close us out here, I want to think of change as a journey over time. And you've probably seen this change curve or something very similar in the past. And we tend to find that people get overexcited right before an implementation, then become disillusioned as the project extends, training requirements kick in, and they're focused to relearn how to do things that previously didn't really require much mental energy. And once reality sets in post-deployment, the output is subpar. And I think someone mentioned this disillusionment in the chat as well. And so our goal here is to flatten the curve a bit, knowing that there's always going to be the ups and downs in the journey. Our ultimate goal is to flatten it a little bit and increase the overall adoption at the end. And we think about this in 3 phases. This really requires supporting people throughout the entire change continuum. So we think about this in the phases of creating the change adoption strategy, spending time to really think about what do you need to do to engage people intentionally, activating that strategy, and then driving post-launch adoption. Within each of these phases, there are some common interventions and guiding principles that we use to drive that long-term adoption. So today, we have only just scratched the surface here. So we've discussed crafting the change narrative with your leadership team. We've discussed generating user insights to inform the change plan, knowing that it will evolve over time. Generating buy-in and willingness to adopt through facilitating conversations and emotional engagement through interactive experiences, and those can be big or small. And then we've talked about arming managers to mobilize their teams through engaging them in the process, equipping them with their right tools consistently. And again, clearly we've only scratched the surface here. There's a lot of ways to engage people throughout this curve, and Chris and I are more than happy to talk to you more about this if you want to follow up with us afterwards. Before we close, and we'll go into some Q&A, and I see we've had some in the chat here as well, so we'll hit on some of those to start with. I do want to just highlight that we have an offer for you. So we're offering a free working session for up to 3 organizations each month until the end of the year, this lovely year of 2020, which are focused on the people side of technology change. It's a 2.5-hour session facilitated by Root Tech Adoption Specialists, and is suitable for organizations that have over 1,000 employees and who are either planning for a new technology or in the midst of a digital change, or maybe have just rolled one out and are trying to navigate that post-launch adoption phase. It's a great session for either an intact team or a mix of stakeholders who are involved in the transformation, and you'll receive additional details about this in the follow-up email, but please do reach out to Chris and me directly if you're interested as well. Chris, anything else to add here before we transition to some questions here?
No, that's it. For those of you who thought they were just joining us for half an hour, we appreciate you staying on the extra 4 minutes. Thank you. Whew, that felt like a sprint. But we
sure
did promise.
I'm more into marathons than sprints, Chris, I'm going to be honest. So this was a little bit of a challenge for me.
So we're going to open this up for 10 minutes worth of conversation for those of you who want to stick on. And Jill, we actually had a conversation from my friend Lauren a little earlier that said, any additional recommendations on how to manage through this curve when you have groups in all phases at the same time? So some are in the post-launch phase, while others are just hitting the beginning or middle phases.
It's a really good question, and I'm actually going to go back to the curve here. I think it's really common to have for this to be more of a cycle than we represent it as a curve, but it really is more of a cycle. And so you do have people in different points of this curve, especially with larger digital transformations that have multiple technologies rolling out at different times or in different phases of it. So I think understanding from the user perspective what it is they're experiencing and where are they in that adoption, where are they in the emotional curve, and then it might be focusing on smaller interventions. So sometimes you have, let's do a big campaign to create awareness and spark curiosity, and Root will do a learning map to generate buy-in and willingness to adopt. But it could be we look at smaller, replicable, scalable toolkits for managers or smaller conversations, so it's less of a heavy implementation lift and more something that smaller teams and either managers or change agents can really use throughout that cycle. I don't know, Chris, if you have any other thoughts on that one.
Yeah, so Lauren, when I think about this, and no change journey is ever linear, and you and I both know this, right? We've worked together. But the way I think about it is you need to think of this as cylinders all firing at the same time, rather than a continual line going up. But it's really in those last 2 buckets. Hopefully, a lot of the change adoption strategy, you do need to loop around and you have to refine it. Jill mentioned about going backwards. You have to consistently refine it. But I think it's about developing tools, repeatable tools, at each step in the process that means that you're not recreating the wheel each time that you are readdressing different audiences, which might include, as you mentioned, new hires, or you've made an acquisition, or whatever it might be. You don't want to go back and redo it. So what are those repeatable tools that means you can meet them where they're at while you're also addressing people who are further along in that curve?
Yeah, and I see from Bert that people also need to know what type of change they're dealing with. So we're in a transformational change, which is scary for all levels within our organization. And I think that's totally right, Bert. Like, what is the context of this change? And especially when you have this cycle, always reinforcing the connection back to the why. So we get to that the emotional engagement piece and why are we doing this? So you might have a lot of different components of that rollout plan or a lot of different technologies that are part of a larger digital strategy, for example. And it can be easy to get into the tactical then. And I think just a little bit of that connection point back to the why can go a long way to help people just, oh yeah, I remember why this is, like really get into that subconscious and connect the dots for folks. Chris and I are definitely able to stay on for another 5-10 minutes. I'm happy to do so. We've got some folks still on the line here. So if you have any other questions for us, please put those into the chat and we're happy to address them.
So John says, our employees are 100% work from home. Do you have any advice for how we should change our approach to engaging our workforce in an upcoming implementation? Hey, you and I both, we're also 100%, oh, we're not quite 100% work from home, but we're nearly there. So John, yeah, a lot of organizations are dealing with this. But yes, there will be a recording. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, John, going back to your question, the principles that we've shared with you today remain exactly the same. But I think there's a couple of watch outs here. Number one, you have to think about how you creatively capture the attention and the engagement of your people. You are fundamentally using different tools. So for instance, Jill was sharing earlier about how we engage leaders, and she said, well, we can do this both in person or we can do this remotely. My screen may have frozen, but hopefully you can still hear me. And in that case, we've invested in a tool called Mural, which is like a collaborative whiteboarding tool, which means while we can't be in person, everyone can interact rather than sitting passively on WebEx. So actually thinking about those creative tools. So that's the first thing. And the second part that we've realized is that you have to be an awful lot more planful and prepared. So oftentimes we could go into a room and you can read people in a room and you can alter accordingly. It's much harder to do digitally. So, you know, fortune favors the prepared. So I know Jill's very good at this. We put streams of documentation behind each engagement that we do that really helps ensure that we know exactly what we're doing and when.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add to this, Chris, is it creates kind of a meta curve in addition to the technology that you're adopting beyond going virtual. And so Teams is actually something that a lot of people mentioned in the chat, but using technology to then introduce new technology change has a little bit of a meta vibe here. And I think applying some of these principles is a really good idea and helping people understand and get familiar with the system. Building in some time in the beginning of engagements to familiarize with what tool are we using to engage virtually can go a long way to meeting the overall objectives of a session as well. So that goes along with the planning. It also goes along with understanding where your people are in this curve of learning how to use the new virtual tools and understanding, do we need to take a step back here and really help people learn how to engage in this new way, which takes some time.
All right. Anything else? Nicholas, appreciate you being with us. Thank you. John, thank you. So I think that just leaves us to say, Bert, faculty totally underestimate what it takes to prepare for student engagements in new technology. Oh, yes. I think there are a lot of people probably nodding at home. And I mean, it's tough. Imagine you've been doing something one way your entire life, and then suddenly you're having to use new tools, and it's really hard to gain people's attention. So couldn't agree more.
And I don't think faculty are alone in that one. So totally with you.
So Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Lauren. I think this is probably where we'll wrap up, Jill. Just leaves us to say thank you very much. As Jill mentioned, we do have an offer for folks who would like to go through a more involved workshop with their teams within their organizations. And feel free to shoot us an email. I just put my email in the chat, or you can reach Jill or myself, but we'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much. It was great being here with you.